Our final guest of the show, final guest of the week, as we are pleased to be joined by the voice of Virginia Tech basketball, Zach Mackey, joining us here on the show as we preview Syracuse, Virginia Tech tomorrow in Blacksburg. Zach, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. How are you today?
Yeah, doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
All right, so as you well know, there are a lot of these teams in the ACC that they, 6 conference wins, 7 conference wins. There's all these teams kind of bunched up together, and we get to see another matchup of 2 of these tomorrow with the Orange and Hokies going at it. We kind of know, we watch every second of every Syracuse game. We kind of know what's gone wrong this year for the Orange. Can you kind of bring us up to date on the season for Virginia Tech and how the Hokies got to this point at 12-16 and 7-10 in conference play?
Yeah, no kidding. Not the season exactly Virginia Tech wanted, or really there were a lot of question marks coming into this season. Virginia Tech returned only 10% of its production from a season ago, and it was a team last year that again missed the NCAA tournament, went to the NIT, and they were looking to reload. Got some new faces. Actually, Virginia Tech lost their point guard before the season even started with a little bit of a gambling issue at his previous school. So now you're down to your point guard. You're with a whole bunch of brand new faces coming into the year, and it was a tough start. In the month of November, lost to Jacksonville State, went down, lost 3 down in Florida to some top teams. Michigan was down there, and some of the others, and it was a really, really slow start in December. One of the lower non-conference parts of the season, when you looked at their NAT rating and where it was when we got into the month of December, it was the lowest in the ACC. Now, to their credit, to Coach Young's credit, figured it out a little bit more so as we got into ACC play with so many young guys. I mean, Virginia Tech starting at the point guard spot, a true freshman. The backup of the point guard spots, a guy in Brandon Rexsteiner who didn't play last year. Basically, he's coming in this year as a true sophomore with not a lot of playing time. A whole bunch of new guys who hadn't really played at the ACC level, coming from spots like VCU and Eastern Michigan and different spots where they went in and got a few guys. So it was a really tough non-conference part of the season, a tough beginning part of ACC play. It has improved over the course of the month of January. I know, just in the month of January and February, when we were doing our coaches shows recently, we've been talking about it. I mean, this team has improved night and day from November to where they're at now. Toby the Wild has been a great addition from VCU. He's a leading scorer. He's a leading rebounder. He's full of athleticism. He can jump out of the gym. He's a big guy, but he just started playing basketball when he was 15 years old. So he's still relatively young, still learning the game completely and fully. And, trying to use all those pieces together. Malijah Poteet is one of the returning pieces. He's one of the big focal points in terms of production coming back. He wasn't the guy last year. Link Kidd was. Link Kidd's now at Miami, but Malijah was his backup and played a lot of minutes. He's the 5. He's starting down inside. He unfortunately had a knee injury against Miami. Didn't play in the second half of that game. Did not play against Louisville, but we just had our coaches show last night. We got to talk with Coach and visit with him, and it appears that he should be in the lineup tomorrow against Syracuse, and that will be a big bump for Virginia Tech. But it's a really young group. They're still at this point, learning how to play together, how to get it all together, and have so many young faces, so many underclassmen that are getting opportunities and minutes here for this team.
We talked to a lot of the coaches on this show, head coach Adrian Autry and his assistants and some of the players, and everybody keeps coming back to what a difficult place Blacksburg is to play in and Castle Coliseum. And I look at the results from this team. They've lost 5 in a row at home, but mostly to good teams. Louisville was on the list, SMU, Clemson. Can you speak to, I guess, their home struggles? They haven't won a home game since early to mid. I guess it's mid-January. What's going on with this team at home? Is it just a case of playing good competition, or are they just not playing well inside their own building?
It's bizarre. It's really weird because, especially the last couple of years, looking at the ACC as a whole, just how much of an advantage it is to be at home and what those winning percentages are for these teams when they're at home. And this team has won more road games than Virginia Tech has since the 21-22 season, when they won the ACC tournament, went to the NCAA tournament. And I asked Coach about it. He said, I think these guys are just too naive to even know exactly what's going on the road. With such a young group and just guys in different positions and that they've won 5 road games now. I think it's a little bit of a mix of both. I don't think they've played their best games at home at the end of the day, and I don't know why that is. But they also have ran into some juggernauts and some good teams, and they're going to finish the home season with 2 teams that are ranked higher than them right now in the standings in Syracuse and North Carolina. So they're not going to have an easy task here for these final 2 home games. But it's hard to be able to pinpoint it. They just turned over the ball way too much here at home. I don't know if it's with a young group. You get so excited and so built up, and you're playing in front of some of your former or your students and your friends from class and different things that it gets you wound up a little bit too much. But it's hard to be able to pinpoint why those home struggles have happened this year.
Zach, you mentioned how it's a young team. It's also a team whereas Syracuse doesn't exactly have as much depth with injuries and just guys not playing as well as we thought. There are 10 guys on this team who average double-digit minutes. What has that done to help the team this season, but also how has that kind of hurt the Hokies in terms of, continuity, finding the right lineups? Just how have all those different guys playing so much worked into what we've seen from the team this year?
Well, on the downside, this has been one of the most turned over teams that Coach Mike Young has ever coached in over 30 years as a head coach, and one of the most Virginia Tech has ever seen. The Hokies had 22 turnovers against Louisville just a couple of nights ago, and granted, I think maybe the more impressive stat is that they had 22 turnovers, were without their starter, and were within 5 points of the number 19 team of the country, Louisville. I'm not quite sure how still, with 10 less possessions and, finding a way, I guess, down the end to be able to will it out. But that's been the hard part, is getting that continuity, turning over the basketball way too much. Now, much like a lot of other teams that I've talked to in the ACC and that we see, the illness in the month of January to February, the flu, and mainly February, I'm talking about the flu and cold and all that, has been unprecedented. I feel like this year more so than ever. So there's some guys that are still trying to get back to 100%. On this roster. I think that's forced Coach Young to go a little bit deeper into his lineup at times, especially these last couple of weeks with the illness going through these teams and this team, Virginia Tech in particular. But I do think that it's a positive in terms of being able to get so many of these young guys experience and still be able to win games. Coach Young, typically last year went, about 7 deep, and that was about as deep as he wanted to go. He's not somebody who in his career has gone real deep into the lineup, but a little bit of it is just with what you're handed this year, and young guys trying, sickness, trying to get them back conditioned wise and play those big minutes. So I think, it's something that maybe in the future you'll look to and say, okay, these guys got good playing time, but unfortunately at times it's created far, far too many turnovers than where this team wants to be.
Zach Mackey, voice of Virginia Tech men's basketball preview in tomorrow's game in Blacksburg. Zach, I want to just stray away from the game for a brief second, because something that we've been talking about, our fans, us on the shows, even the coaches, that's become a storyline, and it is everywhere in the country, is NIL. And I know that's something even the coaches have referenced for the disappointing season and how next season things will change. What's NIL like as a storyline over there with you guys? Is it something that fans are talking about and, blaming it for some ways how the season's gone, and just, what's the NIL narrative over there?
Yeah, I would say the narrative is it's funny how much that has changed the game of basketball, because this year, fans on Twitter and online, it's hard to get a sense of, the real fan base. And those are the loud voices. But those folks online are the ones that are saying, hey, Mike Young's doing the best with what he's got because he doesn't have a ton of resources. So it's funny, people kind of know that obviously here at Virginia Tech, a big part of it all has been football, and football drives the engine and keeps it going. And unfortunately, that's put Virginia Tech in an area where it's not had as many resources as it's wanted to, or where it needs to be at on the basketball court. Those numbers aren't where some of the other leagues or some of the other teams in this league have been. And I think fans recognize that. I think people recognize that in the community and kind of know where they're sitting. From what I've heard, is going to be improved into next year. And, it's one of those things. I mean, if you want to be competitive in this league and you want to be competitive nationally, you've got to invest the money in an NIL. And a school like Louisville decided to invest a lot of money in a new basketball coach, and I say that because we just played them, and they invested a lot of money in NIL, and it shows. They were able to go out and get some of the top players. They've got a huge staff. They're number 19 of the country now, but Virginia Tech wasn't at that same level. And I'm not saying that they're going to be at the same level as Louisville basketball, NIL wise, and that they're always going to try to do a little more with a little less. But I do think that everyone recognized that it needs to be improved. And from what I hear, it is going to be improved going forward.
All right, let's circle back to this game tomorrow now, Zach. I'm sure that you've been studying up on the Orange, and you've probably watched them play a few times this year. What are your impressions of Syracuse, and how do you kind of see this game? How do you see these two teams matching up against each other in this game playing itself out?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued and interested to see how it goes inside, because Syracuse just coming off a big win against NC State where they got the job done down to the paint. Put up 40-some points, I believe, over NC State's 20-some down to the paint, and really dominated that game inside. Now, Louisville did about the same thing to Virginia Tech. They put up 50 points down inside, while the Hokies were only able to put up about 20, 25 or so. So that was a big difference down inside, and it really changed the game. Obviously, if you can get close to the hoop. Eddie Lampkin's a beast, and what he's been able to do through ACC play has been impressive. Coach was talking about him last night, just saying he is such a big presence inside, kind of put him at the same level as maybe a guy like DJ Burns for NC State. It was just a big presence down inside, and had great feet, and, was able to not only get you the double-digit points, but can also get you the double-digit rebounds inside. I'm really interested to see. I mean, everything I've heard is that Elijah Poteet is going to go. He's going to be fine. The starting five for Virginia Tech and the big guy inside, he's going to be outmatched inside in terms of the size that Lampkin brings, and just his straight up weight, and that he will have over Malaysia Poteet. And Malaysia, coming off injury, hasn't played in a week now. So what does that look like? That's going to be one of the big matchups I look at. That Virginia Tech's got to find a way to get the starters going. Jaden Schutt's been quite ill for the last probably week and a half now, and unfortunately, that's put him in a spot where he hasn't produced any points in the last couple of games. And that's a starter who was averaging 18 points the last couple of games against Virginia and some of the other opponents, and then went down with injury. And we haven't heard, or sickness, I should say, and we haven't heard as much about him. And then Toby the Wild didn't have a single point of the first half, ended up with 2 points. He's the leading scorer for Virginia Tech. They've got to get him going. The Hokies had 50 points coming from the bench in the game against Louisville. That's the only way they were in it. They had, again, 50 points coming from the bench against Miami, and that's a reason why they won it. So those starters are going to have to be able to step up and have big games if Virginia Tech wants to be in this one.
All right, Zach, great insight. We really appreciate you coming on, and we look forward to chatting with you down the road whenever Syracuse and Virginia Tech hook up. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, appreciate you. Zach Mackey joining us here.